Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Psychology Podcast. This is the 38th episode. The topic of this podcast, as you guys already know, is I'm going to find the most successful people in the world, and I'm going to find out together with you how they got to the place that they are. Things that I'm interested in is their personal journeys, their habits, the belief systems, how they view the world. And today's guest is none other than Adrian Blackwood, who is an award-winning designer, technologist, and interviewer, innovator, and also the world-leading expert in ambient intelligence. So, before I butcher your introduction any further, happy to have you, my friend.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
I've met Adrian, I think, a month ago or something like this. I'm currently located in Bali in a very cool co-working space called Tropical Nomad. And they are actually sponsoring this video. So shout out for you guys for helping me to raise the quality of this academic venture, so to say. And I met Adrian like in the middle of the night. I think it was 1 o'clock in the morning, and we were both running around in circles like crazy people, walking on our dreams. And I just noticed from our first conversation that like you're one of the people I would be one of my dream guests. So thank you for making room, for being here in spite of your busy schedule.
Thanks for having me. You know, it is kind of funny to bump into some guy late at night and recognize that he's got the same path as you, different steps, but same direction. So that's started an interesting set of conversations. Happy to be here to extend those.
You're welcome. And in congruence with the notion that you're an AI expert Today I have a different script in regards to the questions that are created with the use of AI. So if some of the questions suck, you can write ChatGPT,
Yeah, exactly.
and it's their fault. And OpenAI, if you want to sponsor me, shoot me an email. Okay, if people ask you what you do, what do you say to them?
Actually, your point around having to ask ChatGPT how to frame, structure, and build out some questions, I use it as well. I gave a talk last night, and there was two women and me. Both of these very accomplished, very humble women are like experts in what they do. And Bhavna, the moderator, the presenter, she has a pretty well scripted discussion. And we've talked about it before, but highlighting what she's good at is difficult, but she does it well. And the other side of that, Courtney, she has a doctorate in neural engineering. And she would describe it differently, but she's really accomplished. And before sending out the intro to that, we had Courtney's bio run through ChatGPT. And then when Bhavna read both of ours, I realized mine sucked. And I thought, today I'm going to rewrite and rescript and restructure. So as of recently, as just a few hours ago, me and ChatGPT have concluded that I am a spatialist. And interesting, I did this thing where I refined my LinkedIn profile and I threw it in again and again and again, refining. And when it was done and looked good and I've copy pasted that back into LinkedIn, I asked it to boil that down, that summary, to 5 words. And then I asked it to boil down those 5 words to 1 word. And the word that it came up with was pioneer. So as fresh as hours ago, I am a pioneer.
I love that, and this is the purpose of this podcast: is to get outside of the box thinkers. And I think I can bear testimony to the fact of how much time you put into your craft, and it's a tremendous privilege to sit next to somebody who's pushing the human race forwards, even though you don't take yourself so seriously, which is for me a sign of a well-architected spirit. But how about we start in regards to who you were before you became an entrepreneur?
Sure, yeah.
What did you grow up like?
That's a really great question, and I've learned in my later years to appreciate my childhood a little bit more. When I grew up, like I guess a lot of people, you perceive the world for the things you don't have more than you perceive it for the things you do. And I think I was no different in that. I think everything I saw, I related to what I didn't have more than what I did have. But what I did have was a very interesting family. My grandfather was an academic, and he grew up in the house of an academic. And then previous to that was generals and, like governor, viceroys of India were Blackwoods, and governor generals of Canada were Blackwoods. But our clan, our particular part of our family, left Scotland in 1810 and came to Canada. And their journey was perilous and filled with drama and reads like it should be a Victorian play or maybe a Netflix series in itself. And yet, they ended up in Calgary and they built some stability and wealth and generational thinking. And I kind of was brought through that thinking. How do we incur good things in our life? We work for them. And how do we progress the mental mindset? We engage it. My grandfather had this really interesting thing, and it should give you some insight on how I was raised. We had the Sunday dinner with him quite regularly, not least of which because my grandma was an amazing chef. But after we ate, we'd have something he would call scintillating conversation. And they would pose mental mind problems to us over Sunday dinner. And I thought nothing of it. I thought they were just fun. Grandma loved puzzles. Grandpa was an interesting person. And it made me think about problem solving as a natural part of life. Like, problem solving was the thing that they did really well. And I didn't realize it at a time, but that's been woven in throughout my story.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And actually, I'm quite surprised that Blackwood is your real name because it's. I thought like you made it up to sound cooler.
You're the third person to say that this week, no one said it.
If I would have somebody
Great.
would gave me money, it's like you would think it's a made up name. I would have totally guessed it.
It's
in a
my
way.
actor name. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
No. We have a coat of arms. My uncle actually is in Scotland right now, and one of the things that we kind of find interesting is like I guess a lot of people, we were landed gentry at some point, and in my history, someone screwed up. And how the story is told to me is that it was related to boats in a shipyard and an adventure that did not go well, and ultimately everything was lost. And then when you read the history of the Blackwood family castle, so there is a castle in the Blackwoods, it's rather interesting in itself. And depending on how you follow the lineage and the lines, there's historiography there. There's interesting humans that populate my genetic pool. And I have to believe that their, trials and tribulations and their fights against injustice and overcoming many obstacles have ultimately led through at least the cognitive formation of my own mental mindscape down to me. I think that I've got to believe that everything that was a toil for someone hundreds upon hundreds of years ago has bullied down into something that I'm able to do, or at least, giving me pause for consideration. Because while I may not live in 16th century rural Scotland, I do face a number of injustices and daily upheavals that could disbalance me. So, yeah.
I love that you started with sharing some light of your ancestry. And as you know, I'm currently building a company called E38, which focuses.
I see you here quite late building and building and building.
Man, it's yeah. I also live in my co-working space.
Yeah, no, I'm aware. I'm aware.
Yes, and it's what I'm building with my honored co-founder Adrian Blackwood. Shout out to you if you're listening to this. And we use artificial intelligence in order to resurrect great people from the past, in a way, in order to enable intergenerational conversations. So my question for you would be, from the Blackwood clan, who would you resurrect, and what would the conversation be like in that regard? Can be your grandfather, it can be somebody from way back.
That's a really great question. We've had a chance to talk about this, and this is something I've spent a lot of time thinking about. I'm going to answer your question in a roundabout way.
Please.
That may be a theme. We'll see. I've read The Art of War front to back 33 times. I've read segments of it, sections, passages, hundreds, maybe thousands of times. I know that book pretty well. It's a body of knowledge, a corpus of intellect that has powered many a moment in history and is the untalked about little black book, the secret book for many a general, including Napoleon. So if you're a student of history like I am, you notice that there's historiography and there's learned lessons within. There is magical amounts of mystic wisdom, human wisdom, observational wisdom hidden throughout our history. And when I look back in my own family line, there was a branch of our family that went into publishing and were Blackwood publishers, Blackwood and Son publishers in England. And I think about them and having to capture the written word and disseminate that knowledge like a printout of the internet would be now, or the modern day equivalent to trying to explain what a phone book is. Let's print everyone's phone number and drop it off on your doorstep. That seems ridiculous now.
Yeah.
And you know, the way that you would attribute knowledge in like 1640s was you'd have a library, and that was your wealth of intellect. And today's modern equivalent doesn't really exist. So I'd be torn between that answer of my publishing branch ancestors or the chivalric side, which was called into active duty to serve Scotland via obviously the British Empire as administrators in far off foreign lands. I can imagine there's a couple of my ancestors that were pretty cool people that were pretty adventurous in their nature and pretty risk observant, as I seem to be. So I imagine that we'd have something to talk about.
I love this answer, and I love also the idea of how people who had libraries were viewed as
You were rich. You're intellectually rich. You held knowledge, and knowledge is this thing. It's so powerful. I mean, I still deal with it in models today. When you talk about AI, you're obviously talking about enriched data. Most source core AI data is scraped from the internet, and then it's processed using multiple techniques. What you're talking about isn't a large language model. It's the other thing. It's an expert language model. And the difference between an LLM and an ELM is that you get this narrow focus of intelligence. And I have to imagine that our ancestors probably looked at libraries as like shards of that very specific narrow intelligence. You may have Descartes telling you about truths of life. You may have Adam Grant, telling you about economics. You may go back to the very base of our human existence and shared knowledge, like the Greek masters, Seneca especially, I've been reading a lot of lately, and Marcus Aurelius drives a lot of my decisions. And I can imagine that would have been a wealth that we probably don't have a modern equivalent to.
Yeah. Thank you. Before you, by the way, in the first night where we really got talking, I didn't know that this is what I'm building. So you actually helped me to put some words on what I am trying to do with my co-founder. He knows all those things, but it's like he dumps things down for me, So, but this is why I'm here, to learn from all leading experts, be a little bit less.
I love how you do this. I don't know how you get the intelligence and formulate the wisdom. Yeah,
this shows the depth. It's like this is how I see it.
I love
itself as a library. Anyway, let's continue with your story. If in regards to your ancestry, if we could have all of them in front of you and you could consult them and send one questions for them that would be answered by all of them in a way, what would you ask them?
That's a question I have an answer for. So I've asked this before.
Really?
Yeah. I've had the opportunity in my life to ask my parents and their parents and their ancestors, what's the most wise thing that you can let down or lay down. My grandfather, being an academic and a very interesting man, very kind man, and if you know the difference between nice and kind, he was very kind. He and I had some interesting moments towards the end of his life, and I managed to extract a lot of our family wisdom from him. Things that I don't talk about publicly, and I don't mention. I don't even talk to my own family about that we had talks on. And I feel I have a responsibility to carry on our family's genius of wisdom and lay that down for future generations, whether that's in my own lineage lines or in others. And I think to extend that idea or the aspect of you had is, how do you connect knowledge and wisdom from previous generations and push it forward? And I think that only can be answered in two parts. You can gain the knowledge and wisdom from your ancestors, but you must do something with it. Recently, I've pledged to give away 10% of my time, and I'm doing that in the form of talks and discussions and creating material and content, because I believe without that linking pin, you're going to lose it.
Yeah, it's you're speaking to my heart there, because one of the main problems of humanity I'm trying to help solving is that we don't make the same mistakes again.
Yeah, why do we need to?
Personally level and also on a generational level, where I feel like if I once met a person in a church in Istanbul, and he was worried where our generation is going, because he felt like we forget like the lessons of our ancestors. He said, like, I never forget this. He said, like, a generation who doesn't know the lessons of its past has no future. And I thought there was so much wisdom behind that in a way. Anyway, what are some significant memories from yours that come to mind in regards to childhood that shaped you into the great person who is well constituted right now?
That's an interesting question. I'm a human, and like every other human, I have layers, and I have Truce and remember truce. The talk I gave yesterday was one of my panel humans. She talked about how constructed memories can oftentimes be interpreted as real memories. So I think within the memories that I remember and know to be true, that I was shaped by 3 big events in my life. Ready for it?
Please. This is so helpful.
So I have this very distinct memory of being about 4 years old, and I grew up in Victoria, British Columbia, in the far west of Canada.
Don't forget the microphone, man.
Yep, I'll talk into the microphone. Thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome. Just getting that look from Ayu, who made all this possible.
Yes,
so.
she's very good at cracking the direction forward.
Yes, thank you, Ayu. Okay,
Thank you.
The
Okay.
memories, yeah.
Yep. So I'm from Victoria, British Columbia, Canada, and when I grew up, it was a culture of trust in our neighborhoods. There wasn't as many nefarious things going on. I think everyone probably idealizes their childhood as a more safe and pure time, but in all honesty, it was for me. So I lived in a fairly playful place, and I remember this moment where I got up, and quite self-determined, I just got up, got on my tricycle, and started riding away from the house because apparently I had things to do. And it was like 4:30 in the morning, and my parents had a bit of a freak out, rightfully so, and kind of chased me down and caught me and like, where are you going? And it's like, I'm just going. And I think I probably still do that. And I think I've identified the nature of that need to travel as a core aspect and part of me. So why I live in Bali and why I don't live in a large urban environment is not only the quality of life that you can achieve here, but the balance of life. We have access to great facilities like the one that we're in. I have my own studio, obviously, and just everything else here. Quality of life matters, and I'm a better human for it. So that was the number one. Number two is interesting. I had this moment when I was, 18 or 19, and I had these 2 friends that were ruckus, little jacked up on life, and as young males oftentimes are, and they had come over to my house and they were watching a movie, the Matrix actually, and it was not for the first time, it was many times in, and there was towards the end of the night and everyone's getting a little excited about the things, and these 2 gentlemen crushed my coffee table, like the table in front of us. They pancaked it. They're fighting. They're both very big guys, and they were fighting in my living room, and one thing, bam, right in the middle of the table, and I was not happy. I was upset. And I was really perturbed watching The Matrix in the background for the manyth time that my 2 friends had pancaked my table, and I had no way of telling them how much money they owed me. I had no way of ordering this. I didn't even know where I got it. I did not remember. And I was looking at this table quite angry. I was looking for a distinguishing mark, a sticker, some sort of connection. And, back then in university, I had my computer set up in my living room, and I was there doing my thing, and and I went over to the computer and I really tried to figure out how to find this table, and it pissed me off, and it's been pissing me off since. That one event is probably more than any other was the moment when I truly realized that I have a path and I have to walk this. My ethos, my mission is to connect the digital and physical worlds, and what I've learned in many moments and trials and tribulations and the capacity of ups and downs is that there's a lot to that, and that is my simplified mission. And the third one is an important one, and it's a variation. I'm also gifted with a number of healing skills, so I understand intuitively quite a bit about the healing arts, and to keep that on a very high level, just to say that I have an intuition that I've learned to follow. And by extending that, I've realized that what's visible in the physical world is not the only sources of information. And whether you take that from a spiritual side or quantum mechanics side or bioenergetic side, there is unseen forces that are in our world. And if you're keen to observe them and you take a moment to look, there's more information that you can access. And that combination of 3 lessons has guided my focus and continues to do so.
Thank you for sharing that, and I love how you thought about this before in regards to how you became. And that's something one of the things I feel like I admire most about you, your curiosity and your ability to dissociate yourself from your current situation. Just take a step back and look at what's happening within you, outside of you, and in the world as a whole, from the mind of an observer in a way. I'm not sure about you, but for me, it took me a while to find peace in regards to who I am, what kind of creature I am, and I was growing up in an environment personally where there was there wasn't even such a thing as a gifted person. It was just like the neighborhood was very bad, and it was not good to have many ideas. It was not good to dream a lot, and it was not good to go your own way in a way. What was the moment for you in your childhood where you feel, or your upbringing, where you were before you, who helped you in particular to find yourself in a way? What is like one of the earliest caretakers or teachers or parents who played a significant role in your journey of becoming in the first chapter of your life?
Yeah, thanks for the question, and thanks for the observation and truth that came from that. I think a lot of people, if not most people, are not raised in ideal circumstances. And if we could time machine back into our past, I think most people would probably change big chunks of their lines. You know, other than the privilege for you, which privilege matches them, because many don't like being on the other side. The silver spoon life is not a good one. Not that I would know, but I've heard. And yet, when you have a really powerful upbringing that is full of encouragement and love and care, you can do amazing things. And what I found is that I didn't have an ideal life or upbringing as I would perceive it now, but the learned lessons that dotted my existence have driven me forward. And there's been brilliant people and very kind and loving and caring people along that way. So the people that most affected me on my journey, it was my grandfather, my curiosity of science and my understanding how to merge the ideas. And maybe I'll just talk about him for a second.
Yes, I would love to tell us about him.
So my
What was
grandfather,
his name?
Alistair Clark Blackwood. We all
What is up with the quality of names in your family? That
Yeah,
looks,
it's a good one, huh? Yeah,
Jesus,
yeah.
Jesus. I bet he didn't have trouble picking up girls at the bar.
No, my grandma was a very good-looking woman. I gotta admit, their
I'm
pictures,
not surprised with
their
that
pictures
name.
from the 50s is like, wow, you guys were fancy. So it was good, and you know, he was a catch, you know, a science guy back in the day, and they went to like 80 plus countries, and they worked, and he went and traveled everywhere, and he was a very interesting fellow, and just follow that train of thought. My grandfather and him lived very well, it's from class society in a period of time, as he was a professor in a university and then ultimately a vice dean, and then for a period the dean of Canada's biggest university. And growing up, they had trouble and hardship that was all relative. They weren't poor, but they were not rich. My grandma oftentimes talks about depression area choices, where she would write her father and be like, hey, I need some money, and he'd send a bit of money but not enough where she could have fun. And she was she used a very funny word, but I won't repeat. But anyway, she was not happy. And
What did you say?
no, I'm not going to say it, but it's like older insults. It might offend someone. So my grandfather was a bit shy, and my grandmother was quite a looker, and her sister was also quite a looker, and they prided themselves on their beauty, but also their intellect. And my grandma was a very smart person. So when I was growing up, I had these two very intellectual people in my life. And I thought it was normal that everyone had a chemistry lab in their house, or that there was like stained glass facilities, or like arts and crafts centers, or like artwork facilities in their grandparents' house. And I grew up in a world where I just thought all this stuff was normal. My grandfather, being a quite brilliant person, had 3 patents by the time he was 27, and when I was 27, I had 4. And it wasn't that it was a competition, but my grandfather said some very interesting things to me as I was growing up. He said, that he had regret, and his biggest regret was not achieving more. And I didn't understand what he was talking about, because he looked at his CV as like, I'm not going to do as much as you did. And he said that all of his years, all of his wisdom, all of his colleagues, pushing and striving and, getting forward and falling back and doing these things, and it was for what? He always said in his later years that his biggest regret was not taking as much risk. And I heard that. And maybe I heard it too much, because I seem to like risk. But he said his biggest regret was not taking risk. And at key moments in my life, it was his voice more than any other that always rang through and got me to overcome my fear of taking a path or taking a particularly risky path.
Thank you for sharing that. And I can really see that guy in front of me, and it now makes more sense of how I think, like, when you have a figure like that who tells you to take risks, like one of the things that is also involved in this message is you can bet on yourself.
Yeah.
I believe in you. You know what I mean?
I
It's
put
like,
that bet down a few times, and quite a few moments that did not pay off, at least in the short term. But ultimately, it has and is. And yeah,
Tell us a moment, maybe a story where you were at the crossroads in regards to playing it bold or playing it safe, and like through this voice or through like this part of you, wherever it comes from, you made a choice to move into the right direction instead of what was expedient or safe.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, right? And I think a lot of people worldwide, and maybe your viewers and definitely listeners more globally, have this challenge that comes up. There's always someone that's going to offer you money to do something for them. And if you're good at what you do, you have a choice. You could do it on your own, or you can do it for someone else. And they're willing to offer you cash or packages or something. And, you can make that choice. And I have made that choice on occasion, or you can bet on yourself. I'm going to tell you a story to answer your question as recently as today. I was finishing off working this morning, and I went to sit waiting to have a coffee, and I heard some people beside me negotiating a equity for hire deal. So one of those is where you agree to work and you take a position in a company.
Yeah.
And I listened to them say it, and I listened to how they framed it, and I thought, thank God I matured past that thinking. So when I'm going to work with someone or when I'm going to engage on a project, I've got to be morally aligned. I have to see the vision of it, and I have to want to work for it. I think there's a lot of pitfalls in my own roadmap, and definitely when I've decided to overcome, most of those decisions were that I saw value in either my short-term action, but much, much more often, I saw a benefit in the midterm to long term. And that's where my strategy seems to be.
Mm-hmm. So to only take up opportunities that align with your personal vision and the things to move forward. Okay. Or did I encapsulate that wrong?
Yeah, no, getting equity out of companies that you don't like, next to impossible. And not because it's not possible, is that you're just not very motivated to do it. At least that's true for me.
Yeah.
And in the end, I find that there's value in doing things which motivate you. So if someone's going to ask me, and this is oftentimes big companies that will approach me and ask me, hey, can you help us build a product, or can you come and join our team? And there's always like the FANG companies that they reach out and ask if I'm interested, and my answer almost always is no. And once in a while, I'll entertain it and go through the process of talking to them. And I've done it with some unnamed companies. And I always notice that the way that they engage you as a human is rather ridiculous. Like, if you're really good at what you do and you're an exceptionally different human and you're not going to fall into the testing categories on their preset tests, it's almost impossible for their HR teams to understand you or to understand your value. So it has to be an executive that gets who you are and wants to bring you in and is willing to bend and blur all these rules. And I think there's a big culture clash right now, again, worldwide and probably with your viewers, on people that are motivated to do their own thing versus to do their thing with others in a fair and equitable structure.
What kind of advice would you have for somebody who's at the crossroads in regards to abiding the dictates of their conscience or creativity, or taking the safe road in regards to doing that?
Yeah.
Because you seem to be like quite in touch with your intuition and also with what you want your life's work to be like. In a way.
Yeah, I like that question, and most of all because it's relative to right now. So I think about my time structurally. I break my time down into 70% working on my own projects, 10% I give away, and 20% I work with other people. And that 20% is for fee, and it pays for everything because I'm able to extract a good amount of money for what I do. And the reason that that's the case is because the way that I give advice or engage with someone is really about creating an understanding within them about their optionality. Most people are given shit advice their entire business career or their professional career, and oftentimes just having someone no bullshit you and tell you the truth about your choices and frame it in a way which is perhaps easier for you to understand, but definitely coming from multiple perspectives, gives you a power. And the same advice that I give people in that scenario is the advice I'd give anyone. You have more choices than you see. There's more ways to accomplish your goals. And if you step back from the immediacy of your issues, you're going to find another way through this. And maybe even a better way.
I love this. And in one of our earliest conversations, you shared with me how you made and lost millions, and gave me a metaphor where I was fundraising that day.
You like that one?
I love that. Ends where I was getting like the 10th rejections in a row, and I wasn't happy, and I was like walking to the degree where my physical self was decaying in a way, and that really story of preserving a martial mindset like really helped me that day to follow your advice, which was quite frankly just calm the fuck down. In that sense, that was really helpful for me because I wasn't really in my mind space in a way. And I'm quite interested how people who make money in this world think, the belief systems that they have in themselves. So who programmed you to think in the right way about finances that help you to reach a level of abundance, or even to allow you to put yourself in a position to bring your creative ideas alive? Like who would you say is responsible for this outside of your intellect?
Yeah, my answer to that is that I never stop finding that person, human, group idea. One of the things I appreciate about me the most is that I am curious and I have an appetite to convert data, information, and knowledge into wisdom. And this is a process, and it happens within each of us, and there is a structure for it. So I'm absorbing information constantly. I'm listening to 2 to 12 hours a day of information, and I'm now really taking from sources that already aggregate multiple sources of data and build their own opinion stack, and then I aggregate those aggregators into my own opinion, and then I tell people my thoughts and what my strategy is, or apply that to my own projects. When I look to the world that I engage with, it's full of shitty information and bad advice, and I need to filter. So when I source, I'm using it and applying it. Abundance is an interesting one. I ordered a burger. You asked me not to eat it in the in the studio, and you're laughing, and so are the camera guys, because it's true. But I feel like I need to eat because I'm only doing OMAD right now. 1 meal a day limits my caloric intake. And the reason I'm doing that is because I listen to some people that are biohacking and trying to get the most out of them.
Yeah. To dig deeper a little bit here, before we go about some common bad advice in the industry, I still feel that sometimes when you go all in on your entrepreneurial journey is that you oversee the certain quality belief systems you acquire along the way. You just take things for granted, such as that you don't sell your time, but rather that you solve problems for humanity and get paid in proportion to the size of the problems that you solve. Who taught you about money?
Yeah. I'm going to answer two questions at once. We were talking about abundance and how the differences in abundant thinking. There's a massive difference in abundance thinking. Where I am now, I apply my own beliefs and my constantly updated wisdom to myself, but I do freely talk to other people. And I notice that people that are on the early part of their career oftentimes think that the only way they can monetize is trading time for money. And when you introduce the idea that you're trading deliverables instead of time, this freaks most people out, because the fundamental difference in understanding that as a consumer of your services, I don't care how long it took you to do it. Yeah. I care what you give me. And as soon as we understand that we're translating value into the discussion rather than time or effort, this is a fundamental difference. And wealthy people understand this. I almost boil it down with all the things that I've ever heard or learned. The difference between abundance and non-abundance is understanding that your means of transport is value exchange. Value is the thing that we should be talking about, not money, time, or quality.
Mm-hmm. I'm currently in contact with the team of Robert Kiyosaki. He will be on my podcast too, and author of Rich Dad Poor Dad.
I like his thinking.
Love this dude, particularly lately, like how he's just ranting in interviews. So I'm looking forward to being insulted.
I've noticed that. I'm
looking forward to that when I ask a stupid question and he's screaming at me. When you think of the word rich dad, like who comes to mind for you personally? Who was like can be that person, can be a book, can be something.
Yeah,
someone who helped you to start understanding how wealthy people think. And after this, please explain us how they think so that we can follow your lead in this regard.
I love it. This is one that I don't mind talking about, and it's a bit sensitive because I think I had really bad advice growing up around money. My historiographically, my lineage was, affluence, absolute devastation. Moved to Canada from Scotland. Okay, no abundance,
Yeah.
no abundance, 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 abundance. Right up to my parents, which took a different approach, and maybe that was the hippie generation that they're from. But they didn't teach us particularly good money management. It was my grandparents who were the affluent ones in our immediate family. And what I learned is that affluence and capacity go hand in hand. So there's a group of people that are around you right now that are absolutely willing to support your dreams, your missions, your vision, and asking them in a way which is meeting all of the subtleness that needs to be in those conversations is one of the most powerful things you can learn how to do. And what I learned how to do was be absolutely honest, shockingly honest sometimes, but honest. And this is what I'm working on. It may work, it may not. I intend to do this rather than I'm going to do this. We're working towards rather than, we will deliver. Especially with innovation, you've got to be rather rounded in your discussions and your promises. And if you can learn how to bring learn lessons and wisdom into it, any number of people will give you a small piece of advice. But what I found in my own experience is that I have to glue those pieces together. And that's what's building me up to be the person that I am now and how I think about things. And when I talk or when I give one-on-ones or when we do teamwork or when I build my own products, I'm applying the wisdom as systematically as I can, but I'm almost always ingesting. So this is a key secret. If you want to get the key secrets, I consume all the time and I'm just pushing wisdom and thoughts out all the time. And that continuous flow, like the practice of an expert or a master of 10,000 plus hours, accumulates inside your mind where my intuition is usually dead on. And I'm usually giving advice to others that even if I can't remember the source or simulate it into, links and passages on the back of an academic paper style, I'm able to provide structure, thought, and directionality to a problem.
Yeah, I love this idea of that we are the collection of people we talk to some.
I think in a lot of ways, and I've noticed that in myself. I've chosen to bring into my life a better quality of human, and that is a kind thing to say. And the reason that I've done that is because it impacts me.
Yes.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. I just had like a personal moment of celebration today where I just noticed I had a couple of years ago when I was at the University of Hamburg, I was dissatisfied with my professors because there were really nothing against them. They were barely hanging on. The lecturers were making like $15 per hour.
Yeah, exactly.
And my mind was like somebody who is a master of the human condition in psychology should find its way out to live a life on his terms. So I felt that they were like fake teachers in a way, because it's like, it felt to me like the blind leading the blind in a way. And whatever that is, that sense of admiration we have within our heart, I think it's a pretty strong indicator of somebody's legit or not. And for me, like after I had this experience, I had this dream of becoming like a nomadic schooler who meets real teachers in the real world and sort of like has this pursuit of knowledge combined with adventure. And today when I got up, I was so proud of myself that I could talk to you in a way. It was like I had this moment of like, I one day wrote down this dream, and like, here I am talking to
episode 38.
It was amazing in a way. What was an early decision you made in regards to design of your environment that led to future success in a way? Because I feel that's a commonality that great people have in common with, like Van Gogh left for that place to learn to paint. Hemingway went to Paris because all the authors were there. It's quite normal with acting that you go to Hollywood to learn from other people. What was the moment in your life where you left the nest in order to go on your personal adventure of wisdom seeking, so to say?
Yeah, I've had very good moments where I've been able to talk to myself quite bluntly and with clarity, and I pride myself on continuing that strategy. So on a frequency, I sit down and evaluate where I am and where I want to be. I was young. I was 24. I was in Vancouver. I was in the best condo building that you can be in downtown, and I had this great place. And my next big thing was buying a cabin in the woods on a lake. And I just stopped and talked to myself and was like, is this really where you're going? That a better car or a bigger condo and a cabin is what you're going to go for? And my girlfriend at the time was very tall, Dutch, blonde, woman that all my friends liked, and they liked having her around because she was loud and she was neat and she was very different than the Canadian girls, almost like polar opposite. Good human though, and we're talking one day, and she's like, "Look, I have to go back to Holland to do some education," and I've been thinking about this thing like, is a cabin my future? And she said this, and it was this trigger. This incident was like, well, why don't I come with you? And that led me down a path. And that path led me to a company that was shockingly excited to have me because I brought in some new ideas. And what I figured out with my time in Europe was that being different is an advantage. And what I've learned since is being clear with your values and able to communicate them about how and why you're different is the next level to that. And beyond that, I'm still figuring that part out. But I believe where the magic there is by your actions to define your intent. In fact, I believe so strongly in that concept. I have it written on my studio walls. It has little stickers on my work desks in our different areas in our facility. It's written, and I truly believe that one, and I'm working on it.
Love this notion of. You said it. You led to New York.
No, not.
What's the city?
No, I was in Amsterdam then.
In Amsterdam.
And in the Netherlands, yeah. But all
beautiful city. It's 4 hours from my hometown, by the way.
Yeah, well, like all of Europe, relatively small to get around. And when you put Europe overlaid with North America, at least for me in my North American centric childhood viewpoint, I thought Europe was this magical place that was so fantastically large you couldn't fathom it, and it's relatively similar size.
No, it's small, but I love it about Amsterdam is that it's so many creative people who give you the permission to be yourself.
There's a culture of it, and there's unfortunately pros and cons with every culture. I noticed that Berlin, London, Amsterdam, and Barcelona are really the startup hubs, the creative hubs, the technical product hubs in Europe, and each one is very distinct. But there's a similarity where you get this hunger and this vibe and this ability and desire to go faster and better and improve.
Yeah. Interesting. So imagine we spoke a lot about like generational conversations in a way. In the Blackwood family, there seems to be something about pretty girls and you guys sticking together in a way. If we would preserve you as an AI and you could like talk to your future son or the son after your son in regards to give them a lesson about women, what would you tell them before we move to the career part of your journey?
Well, this thought is one that's on a lot of people's mind right now because this technology is now possible. You can capture yourself. You can absolutely define a conversation that's interactive for future generations. That's possible now, and that's never been possible. You can have a one-way conversation previously. I could leave you a tape. I could write you a note. I could write you a letter. But now, in the first time in our human experiences, generationally, knowledge and wisdom can be transferred conversationally.
Yeah.
Isn't that a wild trip? If I could talk to my grandfather and hear his voice and hear his words and the reassurance and the affirmations that he no doubt gave me, especially in his last years, I mean, I replay those now, and they're precious, sacred memories. And there's no way for me to transfer them onto my future generations. So I think the proposition of capturing the essence of a human is something that we're going to get to explore now, and the morality and the humanity and the aspects of both that need to be discussed in order to decide the guardrails and what's our socially validated responsibility towards AI is going to create some interesting conversations.
Oh yeah, for sure, and it's a very emotional time, even for this interview for me right now, because like we are for Eternity AI in the process of building the proof of concept right now.
It's a great name, by the way.
Thank you so much, and I'm building my parks of what sparked the invention of this company was my father was very sick, and he's like my great hero. And there was a time in his very wild life where he would send me letters from prison, and in those letters I asked him questions like how to get girls, like
totally, exactly, right,
how to all the gist, how to win fights, like how to come back from betrayal. And these letters were the greatest gift that was ever given to me. But when I wanted to write a book about it to preserve it for my kids, even though I'm very far away from having a relationship right now, is because I
Yeah,
work
isn't
too
that a
much.
necessity though,
That's
right?
why
Yeah.
my question. But it's I noticed that with a book wouldn't capture it, and I started to do some research in regards to finding out who has done some innovation in this regard that could help me to
Yeah.
bring this alive. And I met this my co-founder in Dubai who built an artificial therapist in a way, but couldn't get the funding in a way. And I
Interesting.
cannot talk to him, and we are building right now a platform where we can give this to everybody. And we are building this with my father. And it's very emotional for me because it's
Yeah.
seeing his face form on the visuals and his voice. It's very bizarre in a way. So my follow-up question to this personal story is, do you, what would you preserve of you in a way? What would be if you could set like the set of couple of teaching tales before we move over to your career? What would you like to pass on for future generations?
That's the most personal of personal questions. If we're going to tie all the talks that we've had today and concepts that we've discussed, if the wealth of my 1640s version of our family line was to have a library and contain knowledge in physical form and store it for future generations, how different is what you're proposing?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and it's I don't know, like the situation with my father. This is I noticed that it's like I'm a librarian in a way, whether I'm collecting like great stories like yours or wisdom or write books or this. It's I feel this is I am so in congruence with what your family stands for because I feel there's no wound that can't be healed by wisdom
Yeah.
and no challenge that humanity can't overcome if we have the right voices that give us advice in order to how to navigate them like optimally in a way. So maybe we return to this question a little bit later. How did you transition from? What was your first big breakthrough for you? Because it's as a guy who still tries to make it, in a way, is what was the moment in your life where you had a moment where it's like, I've migrated from being from from being a crazy visionary to now I have proof. Like I'm a success story.
Macro level, I'm probably still in that process.
Yeah.
There's some good moments. I think what you're asking there was two questions. One is like, what are moments when you realized you weren't crazy and that you should just keep going?
Yeah.
And then like, what was the lowest moments where you just decided to keep going?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So there's two different things. I had this vision. It's the vision that we've discussed here tonight. Two friends pancaked a table. I realized that I couldn't find it on the internet. Really pissed me off. Made me think, well, I need to connect the physical world and digital world, and that's what I'm going to do with my life. And I've come to grips with that, and I was challenged on that a number of times, especially when someone would show up and be like, hey, here's a big bag of money. Why don't you come build things for us?
Yeah.
And the few times that I did do that, I hated it. And it's not that I hated the money. The money's great. Everyone loves money. Money buys things. That's fantastic. Money feeds you. That's critical, essential.
Yeah.
And paying for a house is a lot easier with money rather than ideas or vision. So I would say to your question that the moments that I had were always either leaps of faith where absolutely nothing was working, and as an innovator you hit that a lot, where I just cultivated a story in myself and a belief in myself where even if other people don't see that there's a natural binding between the physical and digital world, that I can keep going with it. And the incremental innovations, product projects, builds, ideas, presentations, concepts from small wins to really massive wins have all come from this belief that I know in my heart of hearts that my mission and my values align to my path, and constantly checking that.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite quotes is from Jung, Carl Jung, psychologist, lived 100 years ago. He said, like, everybody should ask themselves, what myth am I living? And I feel it's a big difference between people who perish in those creative famines where like nothing is working for you, and those who keep pushing on is the story that they have within themselves, because it takes like a, I don't know, like what was it for you that helped you? Any story that comes for your mind where adversity or failure or something really pushed you to your limits, where you kept going on, and what kept you going on, so to say?
Yeah, the hero's journey is one literary device that features very commonly in not only grand stories and historical novelization or
Yeah.
the fictionalization of great characters in the past, but also in your own mind. and transversely in video games and every story that modern media will produce. And yet, when I look back at my own story, there's some really key moments. I've not always been right, and I've not always made the right decision. What I've learned is that taking the high road rather than the low road is ultimately a more economical way to live your life.
Yeah.
So, but by choosing the right direction and choosing to do the right thing, you're receiving more benefit. So, even though it's harder, almost always, universally, in the short term to do the right thing, it's ultimately better in the long term, and oftentimes for me in the medium term, to just do the right thing and to do it the right way. And I seem to have to learn that lesson far more than I should, would, or could. And yet, where I constantly butt up to is that there's emotion to the movement of what I'm doing, and that there's check-ins of, do you want to continue to do the right thing? And increasingly, I'm just learning to say, yes, I want to do the right thing.
Huh. Interesting. What would you say is, I feel in the journey of an entrepreneur, money plays a role too.
Oh my God.
And what was the moment where, what is the proudest sum of money you ever received?
Yeah, so going back to it, if I was wealthy as historically my family had been, I would have enough money to follow all my ideas and never have to worry about making money. And I think there's an idealized part of that story, which I get excited about. I'm like, yeah, that'd be great. I don't have to, convince anyone to invest into my projects, companies, businesses, whatever, or convince anyone that I know what I'm talking about. I think for a lot of innovators, and I'd count myself in that group, we struggle to translate the genius of the flash of brilliance, and in that moment, how the creation is the value that you give. And as innovators, we're pretty bad at explaining the difference between that moment and then action and implementation.
Yeah.
Action and implementation contains the majority of the equity value. The thing that builds in the long term is not in the flash of brilliance or the moment of the idea. Hey, I want to create a messaging app. Cool. All right. Hey, I'm going to build the world's best messaging app. Okay, that's different. So when we have storytelling and literary devices, we oftentimes tell her hero's journey as one continuous flow. And as I'm listening to more founder stories and getting to understand the wisdom in historical figures myself, I'm learning that almost every person that I know that I think of as successful had a journey that involved them having to do some things which they weren't proud of or weren't happy that they had to do, or almost lost it all and everything's bleak, or as we've talked about, everything's on fire. And the world's on fire, the ground's on fire, your bike's on fire, and you're calm. Because in the hero journey, the thing that seems to unify founders and innovators is that they overcome their personal bias, their own limiting beliefs, and the perception that failure is some sort of end.
What was your lowest moment as an entrepreneur?
Oh, God. I've had countless, but the two that really stick out is I had a hard drive collapse and fail on me, and I lost so much work, and I lost so much structure of work. That's the lowest I've ever been in my life. If there's ever been a decision to, stop living or stop engaging with the world, that it came from that moment. It was just horrific, and I couldn't believe that it happened, or how it happened, or that the backups failed, or that all this work, my work, was no longer there. And I'm still affected by that, actually. And
how did you overcome this?
Frankly, because I was living in Bali. Living in big cities and living in North America and living in Europe, there's this idea that there's a toughness, and as you would have experienced being in Germany, there is a stoicness that is about not talking of your feelings, or dealing with your emotions, or challenging yourself to improve. And especially in places like North America, you just don't talk about it. It's just not done. It's taboo. It's verboten in Deutschland, and you have this commonality in society that we can't talk about our wins if we can't talk about our losses, and we can't talk about our losses. So are you being brash talking about your wins? And I find that weird. And I found that living in Indonesia, specifically in Bali, that there's by population a lot more people that are willing and able to handle the extremes. And a common question has always been here, different than other places that I've lived in, is what are you working on? to assume that you're not perfect and to accept that you're actively working on something and make it part of the normal conversation that we can ask each other, hey, what are you working on?
Yeah. Well, in this conversation, I'm working on myself. And hopefully everybody who listens
Good
takes this
answer.
an opportunity to allow your wisdom to protect themselves from making the same mistakes in the future. I'm gonna, for this script, I haven't used any question of these, but I built it with OpenAI. I thought I would like give it a try. Okay. How have your responsibilities changed from your early career roles to your current position?
All right, so I do three things. I build my own companies and products, and I have a method for that I built up over years, and I stick to that method.
Yeah.
I work with other people, and mostly this is people that track me down and convince me to work with them. I don't publicly advertise. It's just word of mouth, or you come to a talk and you like what I say. And then I give 10% away. And the 10% that I give away is usually like one-on-ones or public meetings or going for coffees or, trading moments. Because I found, again, overall that this gives me the best results. So it's greedy reason, which is the best version of my life is achieved by giving this away. And I feel very strongly about that. So those kind of three things build up to be how I approach this. And maybe if you want to go deeper, just give me some direction on where you want to go with it.
Before we go there, tell us about your current projects, because
Sure.
I feel you're involved in a lot of very, very interesting things. Tell us what
Yeah.
you're working on right now and what the ideas are
Sure.
that are currently
So
possessing you.
I get asked to be an advisor on a lot of projects and products, and that can be like, hey, we want to have a call just to run this by you in order to see what you think. To architecture and in deep tech, that happens a lot, and that's usually facilitating like, hey, we're going to build this way. Does this make sense? To other projects which are like, hey, we have this idea and we want to bring it to market. Again, that's only about 20% of my time, but what you asked me was about my projects. I have these visions that I just can't get rid of that are a way to implement technology that is more organic and more aligned to our natural human experience. And I was denying that I had to do them and built off the back of my hard drive failure and, some life experiences. I was sitting on my floaty in my pool in Bali. I just recently ended a contract and I was, literally floating in my pool on an inflatable peacock. And I was just, observing the world and there looking at palm trees and blue skies. And there was this podcast that came on about how Mark Zuckerberg had thought it'd be a great idea to rebrand his company Meta and focus exclusively on the metaverse. And I thought, you brilliant bastard, you have done it. You've created a focal point for a now commonly understood term, the metaverse. Now we shift, because up until that moment, I would talk about physical internet or the spatial web or engaging digital connectivity within physical spaces. People would not know what I was talking about.
Yeah.
We talk about the metaverse and people would be like, what is that? I used to talk about IoT like 10, 12 years ago, and people would be like, what is that? And be like, well, the internet in your pocket doesn't end there. You can go into the physical world. You can embed sensors and touch points. And there is this reality where the conversation needs to lead the market, and the conversation is now 2 years out from the market. And we're getting into some exciting times with AI and other technologies.
What was your proudest or your finest hour as a consultant?
So you asked a couple questions back, what was my happiest? I think I made over $30,000 a month, like when I was in my mid to late 20s and as a consultant. And I thought, wow, I'm special. I'm fantastic. And then as it goes as an entrepreneur, I just risked all that money on other ventures and ideas, and it all burnt away as it does.
Yeah.
So, my proudest moment was making this artificial level that I thought, wow, that's pretty special. And then, conversely, just spending all that money on ideas that didn't pan out. So that's the nature of the entrepreneurial journey.
Imagine who's the richest person in the world right now?
Well, it depends on how you count it. The publicly talked about, because there's people that are far wealthier than the people that are
Yeah.
listed, is Arnaud, and he leads LVMH. He has a very interesting story himself.
What is his name?
Arnaud, and he leads LVMH. LVMH is the luxury fashion brand. What happens is when you own a technology company like Tesla or Amazon, and the stock price valuation goes up and down, you get massive swings. The luxury market is much more stable, and does go up and down, but not nearly as much as like a technology or
Yeah.
car company. So yeah, he is now number one, and then there's 5 or 6 regular faces in that top 10 list, and a few new guys.
What do you think have billionaires in common?
Yeah, well, going back to my original comment, they're not talking about money or time; they're talking about value. That's number one. I think when I've been wealthy, and I've been wealthy a number of times, that I think about things differently. I'm not trading my time. My time is the only thing I can't buy. I can lose money and I can make money. If I lose $1 million, I lose $1 million. If I make $1 million, I make $1 million. If I lose 5 years, I cannot get that back.
Yeah.
So what's the most valuable thing that you consume in your day? It's time. And I've really, really started to think about time differently. If you want something from me and it's going to take my time, that's valuable to me. And especially certain types of time. My smartest moments, my most impassioned moments, my best moments, those are worth tens of thousands of dollars an hour, hundreds of thousands of dollars an hour. I haven't probably learned how much that can be worth yet because I haven't experienced it. But those moments, those flashes of brilliance, those bits of genius, I'm blessed to have more of than maybe I'm due. And I don't think I'm done having them because I have them all the time. And yet I don't capitalize on them the way I could or should.
Yeah.
And so I think this is a discussion with myself continuously about how I consume time. And I know the billionaires that I've had the chance to meet, and the multimillionaires and the 100 millionaires and the 10 millionaires and the just single millionaires. And, as much as that becomes increasingly more common, you get an attitude where money isn't the reason that they do things. They do things because of their passion or their capacity, or this is living up to a perceived need, like you're leading a family business or you're keeping a legacy alive. I think motivation from the affluent to the unaffluent is that wealthy people are not so transactional. This is not a transactional society. I give my time away because on so many levels I am wealthy. And whether I am giving it with no expectation as I do, I don't expect to get anything back. I give it freely. It, in truth, always comes back multiples more. You notice that people that are of a wealthy mindset aren't counting pennies. They aren't counting seconds. They aren't counting the small things because they're not thinking about the small things. If I'm going to create generational wealth, the thing I've been thinking about a lot lately, I've got to rethink what I'm doing. And whether you're Adam Grant writing, well-worded manuscripts on, great new ways to think about rethinking, or you're just in your bathroom having a moment like,
Yeah.
oh, I can do this differently. You still have this flash of brilliance, and I think capitalizing those and captivating yourself with that, and then learning how to captivate others is a superpower of the storyteller that we've lost in modern society. There's no campfire equivalent to an elder breaking down the wisdom that he's learned. And as the advent of written word or stone tablet or collective intelligence becomes more prevalent historically, we've lessened the need to have elders or trust and rely on them. And in modern society, who are those people? You're trying to bridge that, and I applaud you for the effort, but also for the ideals which that espouses. If we can reliably rely on a few chosen people in our lives, I think we're better humans. And I think we're struggling with this reality of how to integrate that truth into technology at the moment.
Yeah, thank you so much for this acknowledgement. I was always curious, like who a person would be if they would have access to conversations with the greatest people who ever were, in a way, and also like for personal reasons. It's like it's just there's something that I gained from conversations like the one that we are having, being seen by people like you, hearing your voices, hearing the advice, and not just answers, but answers directed at myself and my audience in a way that ennobled and transformed me in a way. And I'm curious if we can replicate this process by if it's comes from the wisdom from the voice and the face, and if it's directed at you. I certainly hope so, that this won't have a Frankenstein feeling to it in a way where people get freaked the fuck out by it. But we mentioned earlier that libraries are our wealth,
Yeah.
and so it's in that sense, I think I'm doing something this way. Um,
I talk about this every day, all day long, morning till night, with really interesting people worldwide. I'll jump on calls or be pulled into projects where I'll have discussions, and increasingly it's people that are really asking these deep questions. You know, what if you could tap and tag knowledge in an interactive two-way street?
Yeah.
I think about stoic mindsets all the time
Yeah.
because I read it all the time. I listen to videos all day.
Yeah.
And what I found is that this book, this Art of War that I've read front to cover 33
Yeah.
times, I still have to go in and dig into. And oftentimes in my moment of decision, my decision point, I'm trying to recall philosophical or stoic or martial mindset and strategy to bring it into my moment. But if I had a power, a superpower, to reach through the pages and annals of history and pull out the best wisdom curated for this moment and built to take action towards me to curate my decision process, would I be a better person? And I know my answer is yes.
I think so too. And it's we talked about this earlier when you shared the beautiful parable of your grandfather in a way, where at the times where you were at the crossroads in regards to doing what was expedient or comfortable or choosing your personal path of destiny, you hear his voice.
Yeah.
And I feel if we can equip more people in those situations, and even just for myself, I hear these great people there say, like, give advice or asking the right questions, I think the quality of choices for our species will improve. And that's like, God only knows where this will lead. Brings me to the next question.
Love it.
What is your perspective on the current state of AI and how it's currently changing things in a way? What is if we would have you on CNN in a way as an expert? It's what do you think where things are going?
You know, that's an interesting question, and I thank you for asking it. And good segue from the last. Look, we're on a path right now, and I think if you're paying attention, you've noticed that things like Chat GPT came out, and it got to 100 million daily active users faster than any software ever has. Okay, so it's the most popular thing ever. Okay, cool. When we look at...
Is it?
Yeah, 100%. And when we look at the web models, we have a number to explain this. Okay, Web3 is traditionally talked about as tokenization, decentralization, blockchain technologies, and yet Web 4 is relatively not talked about. This is spatial. This is embedded.
What is spatial?
Well, I'm going to come to that, but let me finish this one.
Thank you so much.
You know,
Sure.
this is a bunch of technologies, and Web 5 is even being discussed and talked about. We have, 5G now. Well, we know 6G is coming, and 6G is going to be at the speed of thought. When we have extensions to BLE, and we have really good edge compute, we start to dynamically change what the reality is. And as we move into Reality OS, which will be released in under a month, and we see Apple's entry into the headset market, we're going to have this discussion about technology that's going to be rapidly different in a couple months than what we're talking about now. If you're not aware, and I talked about this yesterday, and I talk about this in the talk that I give, the What's Happening in AI This Week talk, I got to constantly revive the numbers. And I just want to talk on 2 points, and then we can move on. 30% of jobs this year will be gone. And 30% of thought jobs this year will no longer have relevance, value, or be competitive. And you know this is true because every time you go on to CNN or any other news agency, they're talking about, usually buried underneath the headlines, the reality that major tech companies are laying off not incremental amounts of people, 10,000 plus people at a time. This is not the economy as to why they're doing it. It's because of AI. And that's because thought leadership work no longer requires a certain type of action and no longer values a certain sequence of inputs. It doesn't contain anything anymore. It's garbage and it's gone. And it's a horrible truth to come to, but it's a truth. So accept it and move past it. And the second thing is, and this is affecting everyone, you, me, everyone, there's on the low side 20%, the more accurate guesses I believe and what the current discussion is 40 to 60%, and maybe on the high side 80% of everything you do every day is going to be able to be replaced by AI. And you got to pause for a second and listen to just what I said. Every time you send an email, every time you think about communicating with someone, every time you can say a sequence of things that you need to do or add something to your to-do list, there's a possibility that an AI can do that for you. And go a little bit farther, not much. What if your to-do list wasn't a to-do list, it was a to-doing list? Like, it's going to be to doing your things for you, and you're going to sit back and chill and wait for those things to be done.
Yeah.
That's where we are.
Yeah.
The reality is that we're stopping the conversation about you having a smartphone with 180 apps, 30 of them that you use weekly, and all 30 of those apps having different interfaces doing relatively similar baseline functionality to support hyper-specific expert functionality. You're going to have a unified interface. We're going to talk to a single AI that will communicate with these other 30 AI-powered systems and services. And very quickly this year, early next year, we're going to no longer have the interfaces that we're used to. So we're in for rapid change. Disruptive change for sure, but rapid change. And maybe that's a new paradigm that we're truly universally experiencing right now.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I love the point particularly made about like to-do lists becoming to doing.
Oh, I'm full of those ones. But there's so many cool things.
Yeah.
What's exciting now is I'll talk to people about their idea and I'll say, that's great, but what have you thought about this?
Yeah.
And we get to this real thing that we all have to know is that you're cool and something else is cool, and together they're very cool.
Yeah.
And culinary arts has a lot of stuff like that. Like,
Yeah,
who thought chicken and waffles would be good? Somebody thought it might be good, and they tried it. It was really good. So you stack one good thing and another good thing.
Yeah.
Technology has a lot of examples on that.
What are warnings from you? I feel that right now it's me as a non-technical person running high-tech company right now kind of woke me up to the idea that our race is playing with fire right
Yeah.
now, you know?
Be wary of all the people that give you bad news. So Elon, interesting guy. I like the guy. I'd love to meet him.
Good
Love to sit down
question.
and talk
If you
with him.
would be
Yep.
with me, Elon, what would be?
Yeah, but Elon's talking about the dangers and risks of AI, and he got out of it, open AI, and for whatever reason you want to believe that happened in the sequence that happened. He has another company. His company X.com is rapidly building towards an everything app, and you need a lot of compute power to do that. And there's prediction and prescription, better understanding humans' behavioral indexes, better understanding the likelihood that they will or will not purchase anything. So there's this, very commercial reason why he's interested in AI. Don't kid yourself. The other thing is Elon did is he bought every NVIDIA server that he could buy worldwide, all of them, in order to build his AI. So he's there on a published letter saying, let's stop AI for 6 months. And he bought every AI compatible hardware that could crunch LLMs right now. He bought them all for super premium prices.
What should we make of this?
That it's all bullshit and that it's all going to happen whether you choose to ignore it or not. Your life is fundamentally different, not because you've done something right or wrong. It's fundamentally different because we've been working for the better part of arguably 5,000 years, but 500 years, and definitely the last 50 to 70 years on compute power. Alan Turing had an idea. He made a mega machine that cost so much for its time and day that the compute power in that machine, the first machine, 70 years ago, is unrepresentable in its minuteness. It's not even close to a modern equivalent. But that thing code broke and showed that human ingenuity has a limit from its actions. Actions are a limiting factor. I can only do so many things. I can think about doing thousands of things and I can put it on my to-do list. But without my to-do list being able to take actions, I can have a natural limit. And our human experience up to this point has been trading time for money, which is dumb. Now we all as entrepreneurs have to think about delivering assets. We have to deliver value. We have to produce finality in our deliverables. And it's not the deliverable of time or effort. It's the deliverable of deliverables. And so that's a fundamental change that is shocking the market right now. And that's the truth when you hear of non-technical or technical people coming up with a great idea, because they're rethinking with new tools how to solve a problem, how to push it to the market. And if you were a master of systems and services and you've got a process down for how to do this, you are a winner. Your money goes in and more money comes out. And we're going to see a lot of winners in the next years.
Okay. Where is the world heading from your point of view in regards to I feel you are one of the most visionary people I ever met in my life, and
Thank you.
it's in the past, visionaries have also seen further than the average eye. It's like, what are some things you see for us down the horizon? Good and bad, please.
So I like how you describe that, and thank you for using the visionary word, but I'm not a visionary because I'm not cool enough. I'm not big enough. I don't have a big enough megaphone or microphone. And I think if I went back on my path, if I fucked up less and maybe took less risk and was smarter with how I played things out, I would have a bigger mic and I would have a bigger stage. And all that said, I still do think I have a vision for this because I listen a lot, like a lot of my day, 2 to 12 hours a day. I'm listening to people. I watched or listened rather to a lecture given at Carnegie Mellon University today. I listened to some thought leaders talk about their thoughts, what's going on. We just had some big announcements, as is AI right now, on releases, and Google being able to generate 150 billion of market cap in 2 days after releasing Bard 2.0. I mean, these are not small things. These are major things. So if we were to look together through the orb, the oracle, the future seeing device, and we were to guess what's going to happen, well, you need to have a separate video for that. And the reason why is because people are actively running this out. What happens in 20 years, 50 years, 100 years, 1,000 years, 10,000 years? And I want to just go in two scenarios because we have time to answer two sides of this question. And it's an important one. One, what happens in 30 years? Okay, we got to imagine that most of our daily tasks are useless and no longer contain value. We're not going to do it, and we're not going to pay other people to do it. So what does that equal? There is going to be an expectation that you plus AI is how you're going to do your job. Without using AI, if you don't embrace this now, learn it now, it's going to be the equivalent of going back in time to the early 90s when all these people coming out of university and going into jobs were using word processors like it was normal. And there was this previous generation that understood typewriters and telex and pen and paper, and they were the dinosaurs and they retired. They were retired out of the system. By the end of the 90s, it would be really weird if you did not have Microsoft in your office.
Yeah.
Right? And the reality is now, it'd be really weird if you weren't using AI multiple times a day.
Yeah.
So if you don't know this, you need to figure it out. So we have a prediction, and I'm going to pull it back from all those dates from the 30-year target to the 18-month target for a second. If you don't use AI, if you don't have proficiency in AI, it's like you not having Microsoft Word in the mid-90s. You're ridiculous, and you're going to lose your job, be fired, or be worth less money. And it's brutal, but it's true. So wake up. Get to the internet, ask the internet what's up. Second point, 30 years. I think it's going to be really common that everyone's promoted. You're no longer going to do manual tasks, digital manual tasks. It's no longer going to be normal for you to move one thing from one place to another. AI is going to do that for you. I think intellectually, you're going to be much more required to be cognitive, creative, and have assertive reasoning capability.
Yeah.
I think everyone that's specialized, that has taken a niche, that's not a generalist, has a longer time without needing to change. I think if you're a generalist, you need to very quickly learn new tools. In 30 years, you're going to have intensely personal education where the systems are supporting your needs, your wants, your desires, and curating custom learning plans for you. I think our primary education will be vastly different than we can even imagine or synthesize right now. I think jobs and working will be an entirely different proposition. I mean, we live in a magical, it's called the island of the gods for a reason, and we live in a magical place, and you meet creative, innovative, exceptionally wealthy people here, not just in monetary senses, but in time and ideas.
Yeah.
And we get to benefit from this. And I think in the future, in 30 years, well, much less dependence on urbanization, much less centralization and work effort, much more normalization and multi-location living, and much more wherewithal of the human-machine interface. And I think a bunch of those questions we can't answer. But 10,000 years, singularity beyond singularity.
What do you think are the like one of the things I like to think about also when I talk to people like you is you just gave us a 30-year prediction. which is which is pro-human. I feel it's there's a strange rule from I forgot who said it, but it's the longer there hasn't been a war, the worse the war is that follows. Something like that. What's your take on World War III and where are we heading with society, so to say? Do you see smooth waters, or as a Blackwood, do you feel like humanity is about to enter a sense of unforeseen adversity?
That's a beautifully framed question. You know, we've got to acknowledge that in our current day and age, that our human experience is not devoid of large-scale conflict and micro-scale conflict. This is a human equivalent to normalcy. We've always had conflict, and as humans, we're inherently looking to be more resource abundant. And that's looking to, you know, invading your neighbor or taking lands or fighting for what you already have. This is the human experience. And innovation has played a very key part throughout this. And we can go back in, you know, big leaps and bounds to, you know, export of the mechanisms of gunpowder, or, you know, Greek fire, and that knowledge has been lost, or even to Roman cement, and that has only recently been found. Where technology and innovation has been a constant companion to the human experience, whereas whenever you look back to whether it's, you know, the pyramids, there's still big questions about how that was done, because the size and enormity of that structure is unbelievable until you realize that it wasn't until 1848 and the erection of the Eiffel Tower that humans built a taller structure. So when we look to wars and we look to World War III, what the assumption is, well, we know that if you're working as an administrator in a company and you're more powerful with AI compared to someone that isn't, so much so that you'll likely have a job and they won't, how's that going to change our human condition of conflict? Well, in a parking lot in a grocery store, when you're road raging on someone, you may have automatic recording tools in your vehicle that absolutely kick on and support your view of things. In a military sense, without going into details, every single aspect of every single thing has the ability for innovation, and anything that I do in intent or action can be supplemented through the augmentation of intelligence. No different from soccer moms, no different from people on active battlefields. And I believe what our universality will need is more guardrails and more agreement on what's socially acceptable. What are the parameters of this thing? We know that in the 90s, you know, you not sending horrible emails to the company-wide email address was a good thing to do. And what's the modern day AI equivalent? Is not to create murder bots, or not to deploy nefarious AI, or to use AI for bad as opposed to use AI for good. These are legit questions that very few people can point to. And our early day attempts at regulation, like the EU is trying to do with the AI Act, we're unlikely to see general adoption and uptake in this.
This is the psychology podcast. How is this going to change human nature?
I love that question. I think about this a lot. I have five published patents, and I have 8 unpublished patents.
Really?
Yeah. And as the way that this works, I can't talk about my unpublished patents, but I can talk about my published patents.
It's just between you and me.
Yeah. No microphones or recording device. Just ignore this.
I won't send the segments to my co-founder and say,
exactly.
look, I got new ideas stolen on the podcast that was designed for this. No, continue, please.
So, look, and I know you'll appreciate this. Let's use the visionary word. I was blessed with a certain genetic makeup which makes it pretty possible for me to think on pretty abstract topics and use these tools that it's not like I chose it out of a book. I was gifted it. My mind works a certain way. So I see things that other people don't. I know that. So I have a catalog, a library of innovations that goes well beyond where we are right now. And it's not because I'm some sort of conscious genius. It's because I've been predestined through my own life journey to amass this knowledge this way. I think about ambient intelligence all the time.
What is ambient intelligence?
Yeah, applied AI in the physical world. So it's taking AI and putting it into our daily lives. I think about how to improve every aspect of my existence all day long, usually 4 or 5 conversations simultaneously at once. I'm talking to you and I'm thinking about 2 other things legitimately. And I'm doing this all the time. And it doesn't stop. And I've learned how to harness that power, and I've learned how to make that stronger and smoother and more social in public. And I can talk to females and interact with them, and at the same time think about math engines that I need to build. Or today, when I'm assembling my recently delivered new tables, we rebuilt part of the upstairs studio. And the delivery guys came today, and I socially convinced them that they should take this upstairs.
Yeah.
And as I'm unpacking the tables, I'm thinking about how I want my next AI engines to welcome them at the front door and convince them that they should do that.
One of the things I'm also interested by is how AI is going to help us make better choices on a daily level. It's you talked about like that now individuals have more power than the president of the United States 30 years ago or something,
Sure.
something like this. Where do you see evil moving forward with this? What is something you foresee in regards to incidents that maybe wake up the general public to the idea that now everybody has the ability to play with these powerful tools?
Yeah, so reality check. Everything that you fear about AI is true. Everything that anyone's ever thought of in a Hollywood TV show could be true. Even the worst things like Space Odyssey and other like Hollywood versions of how bad AI could be is absolutely potentially true. Everything architecturally is known, or at least like the people that are pushing the boundaries know it. Even when I'm consulting to people doing deep tech, and we look at their architecture, there's usually things that they're missing or glaring pieces that need to be readdressed. But the fundamentals is that I understand how to understand a human, and I'm not a psychologist, but I do understand behavioral indexing, and I do understand how to feed that into a decision engine which will produce prediction and prescription. And I do understand how to enrich data in a way which is very aligned to the use of decision engines and where decisions engines are placed in value creation indexing, and by doing multi-engine builds together and augmenting the stacks of algos, or by creating fake ELMs, which is a popular thing in my nerd world right now. Everything's possible. If I want to know you as an AI agent and talk to you about things that you should do, we can do that now. But where we're going to be in 6 months or 36 months is so wildly farther ahead that it's very difficult to guess it. And yet that's what a bunch of us are all sitting around doing.
Yeah.
We're making guesses.
Interesting. Do you think we're going to generate real intelligence?
We already have.
We already have?
That's not the question. That's not the question you should be asking.
What is the question I should be asking?
Okay, the
maybe?
Chat GPT built questions that you are asking are good questions, but we can go farther. Let's be honest, and everyone can ask this. And I asked this yesterday in my talk last night, and I ask this when I give these talks all the time. Where's your car? Where's your bike? Where's your children? What's going on at your house? What color is tomorrow? What's the feeling you have about next week? Do people like you? Do you like people? How are they feeling right now, and how can you see it? These are unanswerable questions in Web 2 and the technologies that we've been experiencing up till now. And all of those questions are answerable with AI augmentation in our physical world. And all of those questions, I believe, should be answered by someone who wants to make money for building great companies to do it.
Yeah.
But I also just want to have one interface for me to experience all these things.
Okay. What is the right question I should ask you in regards to you being the world-leading expert in ambient intelligence? Because I feel it's very hard because I notice on all these podcasts it's like very hard for me questions require as a precondition that I've already conceptualized a problem.
Yeah.
But one of the limits of my state, and I think every human being is you don't know what problems they are unless you know that they are aware of. So you can't ask for the solution for them in a way. What's a good question that people in the past and the many interviews you've given should have asked you?
Yeah, that's actually a beautiful one. There's this old nerd adage where, you could explain it to a rocket scientist, or, like a rocket scientist is the most intellectual person. There's a lot of good meme jokes about that.
Yeah.
And yet, I've talked to rocket scientists many times. I've presented at like space forums and the European Space Agency, and I have given keynotes at big conferences, and big guys have given me awards, and I've done this thing and shook the hands and been on stage and won this and got that and built living labs, and this famous guy gave me a shiny object, and I had to talk with this guy and met this guy, and da-da-da. And all those experiences for me aren't the ones that cultivate the most value. It's always the moments of insight. It's like the big event, and you find someone who's really interesting. Maybe has a big name, maybe they don't. And it's over a fire, or it's a quiet moment, and you have this just poignant moment of insight. Those are the ones that I crave. And those moments, and the fact I seek them out, I think is what keeps me relevant in this world. I don't know if I am a world expert in anything, but I do aim to have the most complete depth of information and knowledge and cultivated wisdom in this world. I think about it all the time, and I find it purely fascinating that not only can we connect our physical and digital worlds, but we can construct this through an ever-changing filter of our emotional state and our desires. I really think a lot about this. I think about it all the time. When I look at you, I see you physically, but I can see you in other lights. I can change my filters and think about you digitally and abstractly through bioenergetics, and combine those things together in order to film this very new thing that we never really talk about because we don't know to ask the question yet. So the question you don't know to ask yet is not what's next, and it's not, what's 10,000 years or even 30 years, is how do you feel when that point between your digital existence and your physical existence is no longer evident.
Yeah, I thought about this recently in regards to, since I'm trying to build a conservatory for characters, and we're already there in 6 months. I was curious, like, what it would look like in 50 years if this will have consciousness, like for every person, if it can have ideas like you have, and if it can have visions.
Why do you do that now?
And so that's a very interesting question in regards to where does the merging end, so to say, and what begins after the merging has completed, and do you think this will happen?
Yeah. So I asked these and answered these questions as recently as 12 hours ago, and in depth 24 hours ago. If you're familiar with like the recent studies, for example, at Stanford, when they plugged in Chat GPT style LLM into a non-playable character, so NPCs, and the NPC threw down some words of wisdom, which was like shockingly good. And it's like, okay, well, let's go down the future a little bit, where everything you touch daily has an LLM AI agent connected to it. And if you've never thought about this, let's also break some boundaries. You're going to choose these agents. It's not like the agent's going to be assigned to your bag. I have a bag over there. You can't see it, but it's in the studio, and it has tracking devices in it, more than one. But it doesn't work properly, and I spent some years building IoT, and I was early, and I fucked up because I didn't realize that we're missing an ingredient. That ingredient's AI. If your bag has an AI agent in it, and that bag's like, oh, hey, don't lose me, remember me, and it's like screaming for you when you do leave it, and it decides to call your buddy, which is your phone, and your phone has an agent, which is your main agent. He's like, yo, you left me behind again. Or like, hey, did you mean to leave me at the house? And like, there's these discussions that you're not involved in. Just let's cut the thin line of fat off the discussions that we keep having, because the modern media talks about the same dumb stuff all the time. It's about how you're going to feel when these things will happen, and they will happen. And the poignant point for us as innovators is to, through productization, grab onto the deep and meaningful emotional and psychological reactions to these that you're going to have. Your bag will be alive. Your bag will have a personality. You will choose what that personality is, and that personality will interact with you in such a real way that's going to be not distinguishable from the people that you care about and your bag.
That's some real Black Mirror shit.
I got some other things.
Yeah. You got some other things?
God damn, yeah.
Okay. Let's move on to... Cool. My bag will have a personality?
Yeah, of course. Your bag's going to have a personality. Your objects in your bag are going to have personality. They're going to be friends. They're going to hang out. They're going to want to be together. My keys have a tracking device on it. My bag that my keys go into it have a tracking device. My other bag that's there has a tracking device. That's 3 tracking devices. I drive a motorbike because we live in Bali. My motorbike has tracking devices on it. None of them talk to one another. They're not personality driven.
What is consciousness for you? And do you think we are
DOT.
building
DOT.
it?
DOT.
What does it mean?
Yeah, most people don't know this, but you should. DOT engine or DOT experience is decision on things. I believe that consciousness can boil down into that this object's able to make a decision. Let's use an example. My coffee is empty. I would like more coffee. My coffee glass is empty. It would like more coffee. The people that are behind us in the studio, they're not going to get me more coffee because they harass me as much as I harass them. Looking over there.
Yes.
Yeah. See, IU's laughing right now.
Shout out to IU.
Yeah, so there's no coffee coming, but if we were in a fully integrated AI-driven experience, which again, not so far off, the coffee would have already communicated to the barista that my preference is to have more coffee. The coffee knows that it's empty. So there's decisions that are being based on my preferences and the prescription being give Blackwood more coffee, that could be automated behind us. The relationship is that you're going to have an emotional reaction to things making decisions around you all the time.
When is my coffee going to have a preference for how it's like to be drunk?
As soon as someone monetizes that.
So you really believe like we are in the process of building consciousness?
That we've already built consciousness. We're now in the process of understanding it.
Okay. Do you think we will understand it in time?
Well, you're propagating a number of potentialities within your question frameology.
Yeah.
And I don't, call you out in a negative way on it, but we do have
please do. What's wrong about this question?
Yeah, well, let's point it out. We are not gods as our existential understanding of gods progresses, and we're not going into human history about the perception of gods versus the actuality of gods, or when you take mythology and throw it into more physical examples of godlike behavior, godlike experience, you have this method to interaction with AI specifically, where we are the creator of it, and yet it will create a massive amount for us. So if you go back to Greek gods, where you have, Zeus and his homeboys up on Mount Olympus, crafting the experience for humans, and, Poseidon and I had a really good talk over the weekend because I work really hard and then I go away, and that's how I don't become crazy, or much more crazy. That I can find balance in my activities, right? So this weekend, I go and stay in a beautiful place because it's Bali. You can do this, and I take a boat, and the boat driver takes me and my group and drives us to a place where we scuba dive, and then takes us to a little private island, and I swim around the boat, and I'm swimming there, and I'm fighting the waves. And I'm going for it, and I'm seeing turtles, and I'm seeing fish, and I'm having a great time. And the relationship of the gods is that the belief of the Greek gods is that one god was derived to oversee and control an aspect of reality. Poseidon is the god of the oceans. Poseidon rules over the oceans. AI is going to be no different. You're going to have an AI that rules your house. You're going to have an AI that rules your bag and all its friends. You're going to have an AI that rules the H&M that you walk into and start talking to it about like your sizes and things. And your AI eventually is going to jump in and have that conversation with that H&M AI. And if you want to get really tripped out, let's talk about Hollywood's right and wrong predictions on where this is all going.
Please continue.
All right. In a nerd-heavy existence, which seems to follow me, or I follow it, there's always people that are talking about the coolness factor of this or that as it relates to Hollywood. Hollywood gets a lot of it right. Honestly, like James Cameron, that dude is looking through a goddamn future-seeing orb like he's Sauron up in the towers. His ability to get it right and call things out is like wildly shocking. I went and saw Aqua Smurfs 2 recently in the movie theater, or Avatar Way of the Water, whatever it's actually called. But Water Smurfs.
Water Smurfs.
Yeah. And they had some technology in there that was like, oh, damn. Yeah, no, you got it right again. Because if you go back to his last Avatar movie, he was showing what an iPad would be, but with just a better interface. And it was like, yeah, that's exactly how it'll be. He gets a lot of the interface technology right. You go back to Terminator, he got a lot of that right. You go back even to his earlier work, he got a lot of stuff right, and he continues to. And there's good examples that extend that with Hollywood, where they get the potentiality of AI pretty darn correct. And there is some that really don't. And I think we have to be careful. So I made this point last night that through the advent of science fiction and from its creation, and let's go back to the mid 1800s, because that's where it really starts, 1830s actually, that you have these stories that were fantastical about the potentiality of future, and we've been completely raised in the fiction of what innovation up to a point is. Most people have watched a movie that has aliens in it, but the general consensus on Earth is aliens don't exist. I don't mind which way your belief pattern goes, but you've got to recognize that from a Hollywood point of view is that there is definitely a belief that extraterrestrial life exists. And whether we throw convertible electric cars with spaceman at our next potential planet doesn't prove that we fully as a species understand that. And yet, what we do is we bring this into the human consciousness by inundating ourselves continuously with media that sponsors the idea that this is not only likely but normal. So when we look at AI and we say, well, what is the worth thing? If you're a Marvel fan, you know about Ultron. Ultron was supposed to be a sort of armor around the world. Tony Stark, this brilliant dude, comes up with this idea. We need to protect Earth from unseen, unknown threats, and we should wrap it in a suit of armor. It's a great idea, right? Except for that intelligence, when you visualize it, as they did in Marvel movies, was so complete and complex that you absolutely could not get away from the fact that this is mind-bogglingly more powerful than the singularity of a human mind, and very much so mind-bogglingly more powerful than the collective human mind. Our hive mind is not as powerful as the culmination and activation of our collective intelligence. We can build far worse weapons than we yet know how to deal with. And just to follow that on, I love science fiction because it brings us to a better level of understanding. The only movie I'm probably going to see this year is Oppenheimer, and the reason why, beyond the dope hats, is because it highlights the reality of bringing technology into the real world. There was this extremely powerful technology. Everyone understood its true potentiality, but there's competing factors and things that we forget through the sands of time that were truths in that moment. They knew that it was dangerous and it could be used for horrible things, but it also had the power to save millions of lives, and that is as big an issue as I think we're facing now. And some of the brightest people on earth are giving us warning signs that we need to listen to. AI is an incredibly powerful tool. And beyond replacing those people who didn't learn Microsoft Word in the 1990 equivalent to now, the people that are not learning how to generate content with AI that are going to lose their jobs, there's far worse potential outcomes. And I think we need to be cognizant of it. I think it does need regulatory approval. But I think our best short-term version of creating awesomeness is by productizing certifications that standardize the illicit for good nature of an AI system as either self-represented or audited in big companies and small. You want to use AI for good, and you want to support companies building AI for good, and you do not want to touch AI systems that are for bad, and you want to verify that your natural human content is in fact natural and human and not an AI scam bot. And there's a whole bunch of cool things that product developers and innovators can do. And from a psychology point of view, the psychosomatic response and responsibility of us as humans and groups of humans is to create trust in our communities and funnel that down into our products. I think the job of government is woefully underprepared for this and the pace of change. I think as psychologists and human masters of self-preservation and self-study is that we have more power to talk to and talk through technology while at the same time having a chance for isolation, that this is so complete and so complex of a tool to understand its full potential that we must do more things like this, which is talk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm also looking forward to see the movie Oppenheimer, and I agree with most of the notions that I could understand from you just shared with me.
There's a lot, wasn't it?
And no, it was more speaking to the limitations of my mind, probably. Let's move to the last segment of this interview, because I want to be respectful of your time.
Thank you, sir.
And not die by IO stairs in this regard. Spoke of Oppenheimer. What do you think will be the next invention of that scale that is gonna be can be compared to the nuclear bomb or the atom bomb?
Yeah, all right. I love that question. Going back to childhood experiences, I, like everyone else, had pro and con experiences in my childhood, and things that took me a long time to figure out in my 20s that were my parents being dumb or me understanding things incorrectly and deciding between those two binary points
Yeah.
led me to understand that, like my stepfather, for example, beyond being a extremely accomplished chef that embedded in me a passion for food, he also embedded in me a passion for history.
Yeah.
And I have been a student of history the majority of my life. I absorb content every day, lots of it, and I'm reading, listening to, watching, or synthesizing data all of the time.
Yeah.
And now I'm listening to people that synthesize data. So the next big thing is going to follow the historiography and patterns that have existed within our human experience, from the evolution from bipodal amoeboids crawling out of the ocean into opposing finger chimpanzees and apes, and us to the humanoid versions of that, and to the at least 6 humanoids that we know about, if not plenty of others that we don't, and the combination and collectivism that occurred in order to create our human explosion. The human explosion was cognition and capacity. Why we as humans like alcohol is because rotten fruit was easy to pick up off the ground, as our ancestors would swing their arm down and grab it. So we're trained to have certain belief patterns and cycles in our psyche and our psychology. So when you talk about groundbreaking technology, things that are as disruptive as a nuclear bomb, well, I think a lot of people would argue we're experiencing that right now with the power of artificializing our collective intelligence. But my belief is that we're going to go farther than that. And let me explain how and why, briefly and simply. AI is still conceptual. It is an artificialization of an intelligence layer, but it's a layer. Throughout history, we've been affected by two big things: experience and storytelling. And experience is really easy to understand because you do it every day. You get up and you experience a number of things. A good shower, a bad shower. It's like a pick your own adventure. Go this way, go that way. But then you stack these moments into experience. And experience is something that we're going to talk more about engineering and architecting. The expectation is I will engineer more of my daily life experiences than I do now. And increasingly over the next years, and definitely in the next months, you'll see products that are tackling one small piece of that. And what we'll have in the near future is homogenization, standardization, and exploitation of the human experience. This is going to be something for sale. And we will talk more about that being commoditized and productized. And on the other side, storytelling. People are really scared and worried about losing their jobs, and they should be, because that's going to happen. But it's also going to create a just massive amount of jobs that you didn't know existed, like prompt engineer. You can make $300,000 a year or more as a prompt engineer right now, and all you have to do is learn this little bit of knowledge and learn how to ask questions, talk to the machine. Sounds simple, but it's complex in its own way. Auditors. Algorithm auditors, that's a high-paying job. If you've been coding your whole career, go be an algo auditor. That's great. Make a few $100,000, and do well. And there's hundreds of jobs that'll come that we don't understand yet, but there's 30 or so that are pretty well known that you can just retrain and be part of. So opportunity exists, combinations of technology exist, the capacity for us to challenge and question the preconceived notions that have been driving us for the last 150 years, but really very much so driving technology for the preceding 14 years from now, since the 2008 market crunch. That point to this point has been one steady increase of technology innovation and price pointing. Now we have the big reset. VCs no longer know how to price companies because headcounts aren't the same, so your burn rate's not the same, so your capital requirements aren't the same, your speed to market's not the same, your scalability is not the same, your potential revenue model absolutely not the same. Everything's different, and it happened so fast that it shocked the system. Now we're in this really unique part of the journey, the story, the history, is that we're going to have people that are going to take advantage of this. Mm-hmm. Just like the person that happened to own a mask factory in December 2019 is going to win a windfall just on human history pushing us in a certain direction. The people that are cognitive thinkers, that are active reasoners, are able to solve a problem for themselves and think, how can I solve this problem for other? Those people are going to win right now. and win big. So as we go through this massive change, we're going to move to a time where massive disruption is going to create instability, and it's going to create opportunity. And I think that's the part of human history that we're going to see played out right now. But we're going to see it played out faster and much more semantically in some ways, but much more all-encompassing. It'll be totalitarian. It'll be the absolute regime of change that will guide and dictate. And from some perceptions, it'll be overwhelming, and some people will perceive that as, you know, a wondrous moment of their life.
Yeah. I hope it will turn out to the best for us.
Me too. But I think that's our obligation to force it to go in that direction.
If not, it's our responsibility after all, right? We can't leave it to other people.
No, like who else is going to do it?
We talked a lot about history, generational conversations. We started with your stories from your family, your ancestors. Even now, we've talked about future generations where things are going to evolve. If this would, I hope, of course, this is not the truth. If this would be the last time you would be on air and you would have the opportunity to preserve a time capsule in a way, what kind of message would you choose to convey in this particular moment before we cut off this interview and maybe schedule a part 2?
Love it. That's a deep question, but also one I thought about. Time is the thing you don't get back. You can't buy any more time. No one's selling time. You can't go to the time store and buy a block of time. You can't buy 10 minutes, let alone 10 hours or 10 days or 10 years. What's the price of 10 years? Millions? Billions? Hundreds of billions? A trillion? Someone would pay $1 trillion for 10 years right now. So what's the value of time? And it's the thing we give away as humans the most. I'll give you my time. I'll give up my time. I'll do things inefficient. I won't even notice that I'm spending more time on everything. Everyone talks about dollars and money, and I don't give a shit about that. I give a shit about time. I only have so much of it. I can make money. I can't make more time. So the best thing that I could do is say, stop lying to yourself and everyone you know. Time is the only thing that matters. And your quality of it and the quality of it that you bring to others and how you'll be remembered is going to set the pace of your own awesomeness. You die twice, once when your body fails you and once when someone mentions your name last. How long do you want to live for?
It was an honor to learn from you today, Adrian. How can we find you on the internet? And this is an important question that I started answering later on. Like, first is, where can they find you so they can follow you and see what kind of crazy new things you invent for the chimps that follow you. And next is, how can we help you?
I love it.
Yeah.
Thanks for asking both questions. You know, I realized, because people pointed out to me, that I'm actually quite a private person, and I do really exciting projects, and I work with exciting teams, and I build my own technology now. So I'm building a company called Spatialist. Spatialist is built and seeded in Singapore, and you can go to spatialist.co or spatialist.ai and find us there. We don't actually say what we do online. And it was pointed out to me that I have a website that explains the potential of what we're doing, but doesn't say what we're doing. And that's intentional in itself. You're going to see some releases coming this year, which are going to shock and amaze. Things you've not seen before, things you've not thought about, because I've been thinking about it for you. And for a long time, that moment sitting on that inflatable peacock where Mark Zucks decided to rename his company shocked me into a realization that it is my time finally. I've always been 10 to 15 years ahead, and with Spatialist, we're building a company that's 3 years from being amazing. 6 months, you'll start to see things. 18 months, you'll realize just how cool we are. And 36 months from now, we'll be building things that only exist inside my mind, hidden under lock and key within there, and now will be available to you. We're going to build something that's freaking awesome. And you can follow me there. We have ways to connect on our websites and our social channels. And if you want to get a hold of me directly, just go to myname.com. So adrianblackwood.com, you'll find my website there. I've got some information and ideas that gets updated on the regular. I write on my Medium, which you can connect through my website. And increasingly, I'm doing things like this, like videos, and just trying to talk more. I really notice that the guys that I admire that give back have a really great way of speaking, and I think my journey is to learn how to translate that to video. I love one-on-ones. I love talking. I'm mildly sunburnt, so I appear slightly red in the video. And as I figure out how to balance everything out, I think you're going to see me more up and about There's also what's looking to be Asia's biggest AI conference coming together, which I'm going to speak at, and I think coming in the next months, I'll be up around the world giving more talks, because I think maybe that's the best way that I can ensure that we have an AI for good future, and where I can promote the healthy path towards innovation and artificialization.
Yeah, God only knows how much we are currently in need of wisdom in regards to the speed of innovation. So, Mr. Adrian Blackwood, it was an honor to have you on the show
Thank you,
today.
sir. Good
Guys,
questions.
thank you
Yeah,
so
thank
much
you.
for listening. I will add all the links to the articles which are going to appear on danielkarim.com and the behavioruniversity.com on
Super
YouTube,
cool.
TikTok, on all those channels. You can experience. The audience we have currently is about 100,000 strong, so we surely can
Super
get
cool.
some eyeballs on your mission, and hope that you can continue to do great things for us.
Love it.
Guys, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoy this content and watch it as many times as you can. I think there is some real pearls of wisdom hidden in our conversation. Thank you for tuning in. See you next time.
Thanks, everyone. Good luck.